Yo, my name is Nico Holloman, and this is the song breakdown for my debut single called I Almost Killed My Friend. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the session file with you, and I'm going to give you my main key tips that I used in terms of songwriting, in terms of production, and in terms of mixing when it came to this track and making it the solid folk song that it turned out to be. So let's dive into Logic. And you'll notice right away that the song is very stripped back, not a lot of elements. We have vocals, we have guitars, and behind my picture here we have synth bass. So one thing that I learned from listening to the Carrie and Lowell album by Sufjan Stevens is that you can make a song very stripped back if you make each individual element as sophisticated as possible. So one way to make parts of your song more sophisticated is by, when it comes to chord progressions, arpeggiating the chords instead of just strumming them. If we're talking guitar, this could be applied to piano as well. So I started out the song with these arpeggiated guitars and I double tracked them. So we have one panned hard right and one panned hard left. And I want to just show you the difference between how it would have sounded if I just had one guitar playing kind of in the middle. It sounds good, but it sounds a little bit bedroomy, a little demo-y. And if there's not a lot else in the song that is supporting that, then it's going to sound too minimal. But if you record that same thing again and you pan each take hard left and hard right, it becomes this. What you'll notice is that if you're wearing headphones or if you're in monitors, your left and right ear are going to be hearing the twinkling arpeggios just kind of bouncing off of each other left and right and really keeping your ears engaged because they're constantly being hit with new harmonic information. And part of that is because of the chords being arpeggiated. And part of that is the subtle difference between the two takes creates a ton of width and also a ton of harmonic variation. So your ears are constantly trying to sort of track and match them. And it's just a really beautiful sound. And it leaves a lot of room for stuff to happen in the middle. So the first thing we have in the middle after the guitars is my vocals. And you'll notice that I use the same technique. We don't have a lot going on, so I've got to make the most of these vocals. And they are double tracked, just like the guitars, and they're panned slightly left and slightly right to fill in the sort of diagonal section of the stereo field. And an amazing thing about double tracking, besides the fact that it adds sophistication and sweetness, is that it also covers up mistakes. So if you listen to this vocal take by itself, I remember when I almost killed my friend. That vocal take is kind of brooding and intense. It has some real emotion, and the vocal performance is decent, but it falls flat pitch-wise on a few notes. But if I add in another layer, it kind of sweetens up the whole vibe, and meaning that you don't really notice that certain notes are going out of pitch, and it just sounds better altogether. I remember when I almost killed my friend. That's just substantially better, and it also fills up space, and we really need to fill up space since we have so few elements. So just in summary with that, we've got arpeggios will make your chord progressions more sophisticated sounding. Double tracking arpeggios takes that sophistication to another level, and using panning is essential, especially when you're double tracking stuff. Sometimes it can sound good when it's right on top of each other, but with stuff like guitars, you want to have that separation. You want to have that sophisticated, swirling, twinkling sound in each ear. Let's talk about some key mixing techniques in the song. The guitar and the vocals, the lead vocals, don't have as much interesting mixing stuff going on, but what really is impactful in the song is this moment right here. Let me go. So why is that part so impactful? There are multiple reasons. For one, it's because pitch creates climax. So if you have something that's a higher pitch than something else, the thing that's higher pitch is going to sound more exciting. For example, listen to, I don't even have to play them for you. If I'm singing, "It's not your time to go," that's not quite as exciting as me going, "Hoo, hoo," because the thing about higher pitch is it grabs our attention. It's like, it probably triggers our primal instinct of danger, that rising pitch kind of brings the contraction up a bit, and it's like, okay, something's happening right now. And you can really hear how, "Please don't let me go," kind of low energy, and then we have the high frequency from here that's also being extra emphasized by this insane reverb effect chain, which was courtesy of my friend who goes by the artistic name NOTALEX NOTSUPICA. And he taught me something really important, which is don't be afraid to get extreme with the settings in your plugins. So the extremity really comes from these two plugins. We have all of my background vocals going through these effects, and one effect is this Echo Boy plugin, which is being used more like a texturizer and an EQ than a delay. The main reason that this is here is the magic is in this. It's this transmitter effect. Saturation is boosted to max. Most people probably wouldn't do that. Transmitter is also a very intense effect. And then after it goes through this transmitter effect, which kind of makes the vocals sound like they're coming out of a radio, it's going into a 31-second reverb. Now, tell me the last time that you've used a 31-second reverb on something. Probably never. So Alex was just ambitious and loves getting crazy with plugins enough to just be like, yeah, I'm gonna just throw this on 31 seconds and let's see what happens. And I'll show you what happens, which is, it sounds amazing. If you take off these two plugins, this section falls apart. Let me go. Way too dry. Way too dry. Even with the reverb. The reverb is not distorted enough to really even cut through the mix, even though it's on 31 seconds. So this effect is really kind of distorting the reverb signal. It's distorting the vocals going into the reverb signal and turning it from this that we just heard into this. Listen to how wild this sounds. without this saturation effect. Kind of bland, kind of vanilla. With the effect, it sounds like a bunch of ghosts are forming a choir and singing in some sort of oceanic cavern or parking garage or something. And it just sounds incredible. So shout out to NOTALEX NOTSUPICA, also known as my friend Alex, for doing that. And I also went in and really bandpassed the sound so that the reverb wasn't getting in the way of the bass and the guitars. The guitars are kind of twinkling in this region and the bass is down here, so I really aggressively cut the reverb out of those sections. So yeah, that's a major key with mixing, and this is kind of a production slash mixing effect where using extreme plugins made this section good. If it weren't for the extreme settings on this section would not have been that good. So don't be afraid to get in there, use a ton of plugins. If you're just throwing like cool effects one after another without even thinking about it, sometimes you can get really cool effects. So don't be afraid to abuse plugins. Don't be afraid to use extreme settings in plugins, and you'll get some really cool results. Another thing I wanted to show you is just a quick glimpse into what bass I'm using. This bass sounds awesome. Check this out. It's very analog sounding, almost virtual analog, but it is a sample from a real analog synth called the Roland SE02, which I believe is a Roland collab with a company called Studio Electronics, and it's their remake of the iconic Mini Moog bass. So they just, if you go into Spectrasonic's hardware library, you can find this. It's the pork belly bass, and it sounds amazing. And this electro-esque bass sort of genre bends this song a little bit. The wild reverb effect plus the synth bass kind of takes this slightly further away from just being like a dude in his room making a folk track. Now it kind of becomes a dude in his room making this kind of interesting acoustic electronic hybrid world. And it just sounds cool altogether. Suddenly we're not as much in folkland anymore. We're kind of in like on the moon a little bit. You can hear that the strummed guitars are also double tracked and also panned hard left and right to create that width, and it makes all the difference. That is just so much better than if it were single tracked. Lastly, I could talk about my vocal chains. They're not that interesting. A couple key things to point out could be that I'm doing a really aggressive EQ on Sufjan's Karen Lowell album and on his most recent album with Angelo D'Agostine. They use really extreme vocal settings where the vocals sound very bandpassed and very kind of saturated and distorted almost. And I kind of got inspired to get really ambitious with how many lows I was taking, how much low frequency content I was taking out of my vocal, thanks to Sufjan, and taking off some highs too. On the guitar as well, I'm cutting out substantial lows and also cutting out highs using the decapitator. You can see the high cut is on, and I'm kind of shaving off the harsh tinniness at the top. This was a $175 guitar, so if I can do it with this, and I recorded on this mic, which is like a mediocre level, like sort of low mid-level mic, CV12, the Aventone CV12. It's like $500. It's fine, but nothing special. And yeah, I want to just see. Oh, the last thing I want to show you. This is crazy. Okay, Stereo bus processing, I don't do a lot because I like sending my stuff to mastering engineers who have been doing it for 30 years because they'll master a song better than I possibly ever will. So the first plugin that is an absolute game changer in the song is this Mono Maker plugin here, where everything below 101 hertz is going straight down the middle. It's becoming mono. And listen to how much it focuses the power of the bass. You'll need headphones or monitors to really hear this, but so this is the bass without. You'll hear the bass is really out wide and kind of woofy, and listen to how much this concentrates it. The sub of the bass is now has some punch in the middle. It's a huge difference. It's a huge difference. It'll be subtle to like non-music people, but if you're listening on headphones, there's a big difference. It's subtle, but it's big, if that makes sense. That's kind of mixing in a nutshell. This is also that same subtle but massive difference vibe. Without this, the vocals and the guitars kind of sound undifferentiated, like they're on the same plane. And then when I turn this on, you'll notice this low mid scoop right here sets the vocals back and brings the guitars forward. It creates stereo separation, or more like 3D separation, interestingly enough. So without it, I remember when, with it, I almost killed my friend. Now the vocals are tucked and the guitars are a bit cleaner. Crucially, I discovered that using a linear phase EQ instead of the natural phase setting, if you use linear phase, you can also do linear phase with Logic's stock EQ and put it into, it doesn't have high quality mode because it's just always set to high quality in this plugin. But linear phase, when I switched this to linear phase instead of natural phase, and when I bounce it, I obviously set the quality to maximum, but linear phase made the song sound about 5 to 8% better, which if you know mixing is a game of small degrees, and 5% by changing one setting in your song is unbelievable. So always use linear phase, always export on maximum. When you're working, you can use lower settings because latency and all that, but I just want to summarize the key important parts here. So when we're talking stripped back music, each element really has to put in work. The ways we can make it put in work is by layering, by panning, arpeggiating. Those are 3 techniques to add sophistication to stuff. And when it comes to mixing, get extreme with effects. Don't be afraid to have a chain that has 15 plugins. If you don't need 15 plugins, don't use them, but you can try like, what does it sound like if I run this bass through 30 modulation effects? It might sound cool. It might sound super terrible. Maybe 5 will do, maybe 2 will do, but look at my synth bass. Like, it's going through a saturation, it's going through R bass, which boosts it up. It's going through a chorus. This is a free chorus plugin. It's going through primal tap, which is putting it in a little bit of a space with the retro reverb. It's going through more saturation. It's going through 2 different EQs. Like, this isn't even that extreme because I wanted it to be a bit subtle, but don't be afraid to get wild with it. And finally, I'll say that in terms of overall songwriting technique, simplicity is often really powerful. The thing that really carries this song beyond all the production and the mixing techniques is the emotion. This song really means something to me, and I'm really telling a story, and I think that comes across in the music. And you can have mumble rap that conveys great emotion. It's not always about like super concise storytelling. Often the emotion can come through just through the performance, the tone, the vibe, the feeling. Yeah, think in terms of concept, idea, emotion. Those things rule the song world. Idea, emotion, concept, those are king. And then production and mixing effects and stuff like that come in to bring that concept to its fullest potential. But yeah, the idea is always paramount. And I don't stress when I'm making music. I'm not like, oh, I don't have a good idea, so I'm not going to make a song. I found that can be crippling. I just kind of go in and start creating. And if I feel the vibe, then I continue. And if it's going off the rails, then I might abandon a project after 8 bars. I'm like, this is not good. Next. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. Thanks for tuning in. And stream I Almost Killed My Friend if you want to hear the full version of how this track came out. And yeah, I really appreciate you tuning in and supporting and coming along for this musical journey. Hope this was of value to you, and I'll see you in the next video very soon. Peace out, my friends.